Greetings. Many of you have already heard from Barbarossa and Nico Chomsky about the BBC and the BBC's attempt to basically create a hit piece on MGTOW, aligning MGTOW with neo-Nazism and far-right extremism. Of course, this is completely false, and Barbarossa has already pointed out the lunacy of aligning oneself with particular political wings and directions. However, in this video, I want to talk about some other aspects of what I refer to as mainstreamification and the dangers thereof. Without a doubt, some of the things I have to say will not be pleasing to all, but I'm used to it, and I feel a degree of necessity in saying them and speaking my mind. I have already spoken of MGTOW in the mainstream in a fairly recent video where Sandman was illegitimately given the title of founder of MGTOW. This is relatively minor and small potatoes compared to the BBC attempting a hit piece on MGTOW. And the time has come to speak openly and frankly about what has been going on for quite some time in the MGTOW community. MGTOW has always been extreme in some sense. That is to say, extreme in the sense of trying to elucidate and understand human nature. We go to far lengths, we search out information, we seek out knowledge in trying to explain the deepest and sometimes darkest recesses of human nature, because we see it as a necessity. And in the process of going your own way, there is, of course, this phenomenon we call red pill rage. But increasingly, many men in the MGTOW community are caught in a perpetual state of red pill rage. And Spetsnaz has already spoken on this issue, at least indirectly. And he got a lot of shit for it. And I support him in his words and his views, I have to say. Red pill rage might be a necessity. It might be a necessary process we all go through, although for me it was much more of a red pill depression than anything else. But within the context of red pill rage, there should also be a striving to move past it, a desire to understand things so as to assuage those angry, bitter, and hostile feelings. It's not a beneficial state to be in. Sure, one feels charged up and emotional, but once you leave that behind you and you find some state of equilibrium and peace of mind, you'll find yourself feeling far, far better than you ever did in a state of red pill rage. But we see these days many men in a perpetual state of red pill rage. And given the diversification of the MGTOW community, which really has no identifiable core principle or philosophy, or so it's claimed, this has been on the uptake. That is to say, more and more men in a perpetual state of red pill rage. Now, where does this come from? Well, it comes from, quite frankly, ignoring some basic principles of MGTOW philosophy and MGTOW epistemology. You see, we've made the mistake of being so poorly defined as a community that anything goes. We've made the mistake of saying all MGTOW entails is don't get married and maybe don't cohabitate. And of course, those are essential tenets of MGTOW and going your own way. But in doing so and leaving it at that, we deny the core principles that people such as Barbaros and I have worked very hard at establishing throughout the years. The idea that inherent to MGTOW philosophy and principles and going your own way is the desire and indeed necessity to seek out knowledge and try to understand the world and your place in it, to try to understand the human animal. Know thyself. That has always been a core principle of MGTOW philosophy. And frankly speaking, those who deny that, those who simply say it's just about not getting married and doing whatever the fuck you want, don't have a fucking clue. Without the basis of human knowledge and the desire to understand, there's nothing left of MGTOW. The bachelor who doesn't get married because he quote-unquote doesn't feel like it aimlessly wanders about. He doesn't necessarily understand what's motivating his behavior, his actions, why he's doing things. That's the difference. And when you have people who are not focused on the core of MGTOW philosophy and epistemology, that is to say, seeking knowledge and trying to understand yourself in relation to the world, and making it a priority, in fact, what you end up with is a bunch of guys who don't understand anything, don't understand themselves, and frankly speaking, don't care to understand themselves. They just like to rage. They like to engage in red pill rage. They like to engage in visceral emotion and emotional fits because they feel wronged, they feel angry, which of course is understandable. But one has to move past that at some point in time. Some of this comes from another thing I refer to as soundbiteification. Of course, the greatest exemplar of this principle is Sandman. Sandman that has repeatedly claimed that the best way to spread the MGTOW message is to approach everything and anything we do in the same manner as feminists. That is, use social media, spam up the search engine optimization list with videos, spread quote-unquote MGTOW to every corner on Earth at all costs, heedless of the consequences of this approach. Soundbiteification, and we had encountered a small consequence of this approach when Sandman was, as I said, falsely named the founder of MGTOW in some pseudo-hit piece made by the Huffington Post, Canada. Once again, small potatoes, relatively minor. But I have something else to say. And of course, people are not going to like what I have to say about this. But frankly speaking, once again, the notion that MGTOW can be philosophy, epistemology, and principles, that these things can be contained within the notion of a soundbite, within the length of a soundbite, is absurd and ludicrous. And still more frankly speaking, those men out there who do not have the attention span and the patience and the desire to seek actual knowledge that goes beyond the notion of soundbite do not belong in MGTOW. If all you can do is listen to a bunch of sound bites because it gives you a feel-good feeling and your brain doesn't work past 10 minutes, you really have no place in the community, as I see it. And you might hate me for that. You might think I'm an arrogant, elitist asshole for that, but I have my reasons for saying that. You see, you can only say so much in 10 minutes, and you can say, indeed, as Sandman often does, very little in 10 minutes as well. The idea that we should commercialize MGTOW, that mainstreamification is a long-term goal, puts us at odds with the mainstream media. We all know that the mainstream media works in the context of sound bites. Everything is a sound bite. That's how people operate. I've always thought that MGTOW-minded men were better than this. My subs, I know, are intelligent men, and they know the value of listening past, say, 10 minutes. They know the value of trying to understand things and the value and necessity of taking your time to explain things. That's, of course, not how mainstream media operates. And indeed, it's not how Sandman operates, or anyone else trying to commercialize something, in particular, in this case, MGTOW. The commercialization effect has led in part to this misunderstanding, to this state of affairs these days where so many men in the quote-unquote MGTOW community are in a perpetual state of red pill rage, in a state of confusion, and they do not care to solve this state of confusion. They do not care to heal themselves. It just feels good. They don't really even know what it feels like. They just return for the sound bites endlessly, again and again and again, and thus you'll hear really, really simplified and overly simplified statements such as, women suck. Yeah, so what? Sometimes they do. They do perform fellatio. No pun intended. But there is far more to MGTOW than has been dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio. Frankly speaking, we cannot continue along the current trajectory. And the recent conflict or hit piece engaged in by the BBC is to me an indication that we need to start delineating clear lines in the MGTOW community. We need to start defining things. We can no longer sit by idly in a vacuous, nebulous state proclaiming that all that MGTOW entails is not getting married and not cohabitating. Now, MGTOW might entail a whole bunch of other things, but we can never forget the core principles and philosophy, the epistemology, the methodology, the way some of us have tried and striven to bring about calm, rational understanding of the human state of affairs and both male and female nature, not from a position of hate, not from a position of love, but from a position of cold neutrality. Because it's in that cold neutrality that we can calmly and rationally argue our case. Now, to be fair, the position in the context and the eyes of mainstream media of never get married can be viewed as extreme. But I can offer a sample as a counter to that. Let's say one were interviewed, an informed MGTOW-minded man were interviewed about his vehement opposition to getting married. He could bring data with him, printouts. He could look at divorce statistics, the 50%, the overall 50% rate. He could take, in addition to that, data from the internet across multiple countries showing that women, in over 70% of the cases, initiate divorce. And this is a nigh universal across the globe. He could then say, the guy trying to do the hit piece and trying to shame him and make him look like a fool, consider this as a business deal. Would you enter into a business contract when the business has a contract or the opportunity, the undertaking has a 50% chance to fail? And more importantly, when your partner that you're supposed to be engaging in with here has a over 70% chance of bailing out and leaving you high and dry, what sane man and what rational man would undertake this business proposition? And then all you would need to say is, I rest my case. However stupid the person might try to make you look, he would look the fool, because no rational person on earth, I believe, man or woman, would undertake any business proposition under those circumstances. So there are calm, rational ways in which we can argue our points. But if the raging man, the irrational man, the man who does not seek knowledge, the man who denies these things, is addressed, all he has is his rage, his anger, intense words, hatred even. This will get us nowhere. And the potential ramifications of this are long-reaching, I believe. It might be that the time is nigh, that MGTOW is exposed to the mainstream. I would prefer it not to be. I would prefer to accept the loss of the soundbite-ridden masses for the sake of maintaining a degree of integrity within the MGTOW community. Rational, intelligent-minded men who are trying to understand themselves and the world. Not men who seek to listen to sound bites as if it were a radio show, elevator music played in the background over and over and over again, endless repetition. If indeed the time is nigh, we need to be armed with knowledge. We need to be of calm demeanor. We need to be able to approach everything from a position of neutrality. Just the facts. The facts, in the end, will win. You see, because the opposition, our opposition, engages in soundbitification and visceral emotion, that approach cannot be countered by like. Like cannot be countered by like. If we are opposed using this methodology of soundbitification, commercialization, and visceral emotion, we need to strike back with knowledge, information, and calm, rational demeanor. It's that simple. I think this is been required to say for quite some time. We've let the MGTOW community become completely nebulous. There are 1,000 talking heads. There are people speaking absurdities, frankly speaking, guys like MGTOW United or Sexy MGTOW. And the goal is not to make MGTOW accessible to all, because if all certain people can do is listen to sound bites, MGTOW will never be accessible to these people. If that's all it is, then MGTOW, frankly speaking, in my view, has no place for the masses. Just like certain subjects that are inaccessible to some people also are not the province of the masses. And that's fine. MGTOW-minded men who know what it takes to look into themselves, review themselves, who seek to progress, evolve, develop, to seek to understand, that's what MGTOW is about. These are the men of MGTOW. These are the core men of MGTOW. If all you can do is listen to sound bites, if all you can do is be content to forever be in a perpetual state of rage, if you do not seek to overcome this state of rage, if you do not seek to better yourself mentally and emotionally, you are in the wrong place. And these sorts of men should never be viewed as exponents of MGTOW, either within the community or external to the community. They should not be viewed as exponents of MGTOW and explaining MGTOW principles, because frankly speaking, they don't have a fucking clue. They don't understand because they don't even understand themselves. So how are they going to explain the principles and positions of MGTOW? As I said, this might not have been pleasing to listen to for many, but I don't fucking give a shit. This needed to be said, and it needs to be said. We need to start delineating the lines of what it means to go your own way. And it's not just, fuck everything, don't get married. That tells you nothing. We need to look within ourselves. We need to look at the world. We need to understand. If I were to use one word to describe what MGTOW is, it is understanding. And from that follows everything else. Yes, there are many other aspects of MGTOW, but based on that one core principle, we can derive everything else. That's pretty much all I have to say right now. But thank you for watching, and if Zeus wills it, I will talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.